Welcome to the All People podcast, where we talk all people all the time. I'm your host, Elisa Southall. My goal is to improve candidate and employee experiences as well as company cultures throughout U.S. employers. We do this by leading with empathy, diversity, inclusion, equality, teamwork, and transparency. Come on this journey with me. Welcome back to another episode of All People podcast, where we talk all people all the time. I am your host, Elisa Southall, and I am here today with Karen Rojas. Karen, say hi.
Hi.
So Karen is a job seeker that I've had the privilege of working with, and I'm going to let her tell you, her story, but it's a really interesting story, and I think it's going to really be impactful for not only hiring managers and job seekers out there. So Karen, tell us a little bit about you.
So my name is Karen Rojas. Currently, I live in Tampa, Florida. I will be relocating to the Pennsylvania area. Not sure what area just yet. I am one of the thousands of transitioning teachers. I transitioned out of the classroom July 2022 with the hopes of finding a role, something that was sustainable, something that would allow me to grow in my profession, to grow professionally, to have better opportunities for myself and for my daughter.
Yeah. And honestly, I want to touch a little bit on that transitioning teacher piece. And for me, what I think is so fascinating, and you and I have talked about this, but, as a transitioning teacher, you come in with so many different skills that you can bring to an organization. The challenge for you, and we've discussed this thoroughly, is you have to be the one to explain to a company how that happens. Right. So on your resume, if you just put teacher, a lot of times businesses don't know how to translate, how is this going to work in our organization or in this particular role? And so you're building resumes for jobs that you want and explaining, here's how my teacher experience sort of segues in. And so in your job search, what are the types of roles that you've been searching for?
So I've been through the gamut pretty much. So most teachers, when they leave the classroom, they default most of the time, as I've seen, to instructional design. And that particular career became inundated really quickly. And I'm the type of person, I usually don't go with what everyone's doing. I usually go the opposite direction. I'm one of those. So I wanted to also stay true to who I am as an educator. So I feel the most comfortable in the role of student success. Now that's a huge, huge title. And under that, there's student advisor, there's student wellness. That's the new title, student wellness. Academic advisor, virtual teacher, student services. There's so many, opportunities in that particular role because I still want to work. I still want to work with kids and help them to be successful.
That's interesting. And I would even say for people that maybe are trying to transition away from children, right? Learning and development is not necessarily the organizational design. And in your case, in terms of student success, we also talked about employee success, right? Because it has a lot of transferable skills. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, but you're looking for primarily remote opportunities, right? You're really going for that work-life balance of remote.
I am open to, I'm definitely, remote would be the best thing. I'm a single mom and, having to juggle, her and the responsibilities that come with being a single mom, remote would be great, especially since I am actually in the process of relocating from, Florida to Pennsylvania. Hybrid, I would be open to hybrid. I'd have to, juggle some things, but I'm used to juggling, so that wouldn't be a problem.
Absolutely. And in terms of, your overall job search experience, right? I mean, you mentioned that you transitioned out in 2022, so it's been almost a full year now.
Correct.
How has that experience been for you?
It's been very interesting. There's been some highs and lows, and the highs are pretty much, getting to know people, like yourself that are invested in other folks, right? So the networking has been great. Getting to know different people and, learning the job market, learning about my strengths and my weaknesses has really it's been helpful. There's been some lows to the job search. And I guess the biggest low is financial. As I said, I'm a single mom and having to provide for my daughter has been the biggest challenge. And I haven't heard people talk about this, but one of the financial issues with being a job seeker is you're no longer obviously making money, but I'm no longer putting money into any form of pension. or retirement. So that has been put on hold. You do not receive any, well, for myself, there's no financial compensation. Health insurance is a
Life
challenge.
insurance.
Life insurance, health insurance, all those things that allow me to feel comfortable that I'm providing something for my daughter. And I don't hear people talk about those things actually.
Mm. You're right. And it's more about that quality of life, right? Health is a big priority. And when you don't have a job, you have to put your
Right.
your health second,
And
really.
so let me add. So as soon as I left the classroom, I went to one of the local offices where someone could apply for in the state of Florida, they're called SNAP benefits. So food stamps, that whole thing. And I did that with the intentions of trying to find out if there were any problems that a single mom, in my case, would have. I wanted to know how it all went down. And, there were some hiccups along the way. And what I found out in the state of Florida is if you have about 3 months mortgage or rent saved, you do not qualify for anything. So if I can provide shelter for my daughter for 3 months, I do not qualify for any type of state or local benefits.
Mm, that's awful.
It is. It is. And I've had people say, okay, well then, you could submit this document, just don't put your bank statement, don't put these, and I'm definitely not going to do that. So I have not had health benefits in 1 year.
Wow. And your journey, it speaks to the journey that I hear a lot of job seekers having, and you can weigh in because you know a lot of job seekers as well. It's been really hard for people to find opportunities, and whether it's not finding them, right? They're finding them on LinkedIn, but they're not getting callbacks, or they're getting interviews and they're not being selected. I mean, I know for you that has been a frustration, is you have the skill, you can do these jobs, but it's why is it not being seen by other people?
I think that's a loaded question. And I think the job market is inundated with applicants. So there's been several layoffs, teachers constantly leaving the district, their districts, the classroom. So I just think the job market is really inundated with applicants. It's really saturated. And there's a lot of things happening in companies. And I think companies are learning a lot about this process. And so they, certain even, positions have been on hold. So there's just a lot of things happening, to be honest with you. It's hard to answer that question in just, 1 or 2 sentences.
No, and it wasn't necessarily like, to ask you, because I know you don't have those answers, but that's the frustration that people in your position are feeling, is like, we feel like we're doing all the pieces right, but we're not getting the feedback that says,
Right.
you can do this better, or, sometimes it's just, you did great, but we're not hiring you, which is not helpful.
Right. So I had, so to date, I've had 130 coffee chats because I love networking and speaking with people. And this is what people say, Karen, and you may have said this to me, you probably have, you're doing all the things, right? So, and there's a part of me that also feels like you have to be positioned or have the right mindset, or you'd be in the right position, for an opportunity. So there's a lot of little things, that come with this process.
And I'm a firm believer, and I've shared this with you, Karen, that no matter what being you want to call it, right? I usually call it the universe, but some people have deities or gods or whatever else. The universe guides us in a specific direction. And sometimes we miss out on opportunities because they weren't right for us.
Absolutely.
We don't know that at the time. It's hard to kind of see that, but it's even happened to me where I didn't get opportunities and I was really questioning why. And looking back on it now, if I'd gotten any one of those opportunities, I never would have opened my business.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. And so the universe kept pointing me in a different direction than I wanted to go. And I was like, okay, I just got to put my hands up and follow. Right.
It's funny you say that, because I've had several times that after I apply for a role, I've had this little voice, literally, and we could say God, universe, whatever. And I've had this little voice, kind of just whisper to me, that role was not the one for you. It's happened so many times. So I believe that you have to be positioned and it could be the right time. It could be maybe the hiring manager was not the one, that was placed in the corporation at the time. It could be a lot of things.
Yeah, a lot. So in terms of your your job search, what do you feel has been a big hurdle for you to overcome?
So I had someone tell me or call me a multi-potentialite. She said, "You are a multi-potentialite." And the person referred to me in this way a few months ago. Now that was maybe 8 or 10 months in, to the job search. And that was the first time I heard that phrase. And I was really taken aback. And I thought to myself, wow, okay, that's true. So I feel like I have so many good qualities and so many skills. I think it's taken me a long time to find what I really want to do. So the hurdle is, I have all these great qualities, all these skills. I've met so many people. So many people have spoken into my life and said, you have, this skill, you're a great problem solver, you're all these things, but it's really narrowing down what it is I really want to do. And it's taken some time. Like, I'm the person that is distracted by the glittery, fancy things. You give me a project, I'm just going to go in and then, but I had to really pull back and say, what do I really want to do?
Mm. And that's one of the pieces of advice I give every job seeker I work with is create your ideal job description.
Absolutely.
And then find a percentage that you want all of those jobs that you apply to match. Because, and you may be able to speak to this, we get desperate and we sort of get in this mode of like, I'm going to apply to anything because I know I'm qualified to do it. But going from one thing that you don't like to another thing you don't like isn't helpful.
Absolutely.
And so that's where creating that ideal job description and saying, okay, I need this to match 70% or greater, or else I cannot apply. That is the thing I'm holding myself to, right? So that I'm not going to a role that is going to impact my mental health worse.
Right. Right. I agree. I agree with that. Definitely. And it's
Mm.
funny, I did a little search recently. I took a list of my passions, a list of my strengths, and a list of 3 things I want to do. And I put it in Chat GBT just to see, what role I could create for myself. And I was shocked. I ranked high as a project manager.
Hmm.
So I did a little search on myself just to see, just to see what I would get. I was just curious. So, I would advise job seekers to do the same, just find out what your skill set is. What do you like to do? What are your passions, and just put it all together. And you never know what kind of role you'll find for yourself.
First of all, I love that you're using the AI, right? I think
Oh,
that's
love it.
great.
Best friend.
Great. But I can totally see you being a great project manager, right? And I can see it not only because I've had the privilege of speaking with you, but also because as a teacher, I mean, everything that you're doing is managing a project. Every single time students are in the room, you're managing a project.
Right.
And so I can see that really being the case and you having a lot of strength there.
Right. It's funny you say that. I keep saying that, right? So currently I feel like I'm managing a lot of projects. So I'm managing the job search, I'm managing a move, and my daughter is a dog walker. And I've advised her we've created some business cards, and she goes out and she gives her business cards, and she is being inundated with customers, inundated. And so I'm managing her finances, I'm managing her schedule. So yes, I'm going to say project manager, definitely. I know I can do it.
Awesome. Yeah. And, I think the other thing that is interesting for you is you've also taught more than one area, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about the disciplines, so to speak, that you've taught in?
Okay, so I currently am certified K-6 in the state of Florida. I've had opportunities to teach K-12. Way back when, I taught high school English. I taught overseas in South America. When I lived in New York, way back when, I taught grades 6 through 8. In Florida, I taught, K-5. I've taught virtual, as I said, overseas, and as well as brick and mortar. I'm tutoring about 5 kids, throughout the summer. Parents want some, enrichment and some remediation. So I would have to say that I've taught pretty much the gamut of students, K-12.
Yeah. And you've done a lot of English. I think you've done some math too, right?
Yeah, so I've taught math, social studies. I was writing these down the other day: math, social studies, English, writing, science, as well as Spanish. So yes.
So you could be, I think you'd really position well as an ESOL teacher, because not only could you help with the people that are speaking Spanish to sort of bridge the gap. If they are struggling to find a word, you can talk to them in sort of a native language.
Yes. And I've been really looking into some tutoring opportunities, to tutor, ESOL students. So these are kids that they speak their English is not their native language. And when I taught in my district, I received the ESOL certification. So I'm certified to teach, ESOL students. I'm also a certified reading teacher in the state of Florida. And so that's, I had to take about 300 additional training hours to become certified in those two areas. And I love the ESOL kids because those are the kids that, they get pulled out. And a lot of times, to be honest with you, curriculum, they do not do a really good job, as I've seen, providing ELL, enrichment activities and stuff like that. So, that's why I really love that community of kids.
Yeah. And, one of the things you and I talked about, those students, right, who are gifted, right, who have this really gifted mind, oftentimes you're the one that's finding those kids and setting them aside in a good way to say, let's get them on a different path that challenges them, right? And I know that you talked about that with a lot of pride. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
So gifted kids are these kids that have what we call giftedness to them. And so oftentimes they're the kids that have a personality. You look at them, they're the leader. It's the kid that's taking charge, they're taking control. They're the teacher assistant, and they have this really rich vocabulary. They have a desire to learn and to know lots of different things. And I would focus on those kids in particular. Like, those are the kids, unfortunately, that in the classroom, they're the kid that's left, in the corner reading a book while the teacher works on students that are below level. And I would take additional time to work with those gifted kids because they need the enrichment. They need the different activities in order to grow. Like, it's, academically, it's not okay to say, okay, just sit in a corner, Jonathan, and read a book. And so I would spend lots and lots of time. When I taught virtually, my district has a virtual school. There were about 9 kids that I saw giftedness in them. Now, and again, like, this was the virtual, program that I worked for. And I identified 9 of them, and I submitted their names to the gifted and talented screener, program, and they actually screened them. And 8 out of the 9 passed the screener, which is 89%. So I have this way of paying attention to kids, knowing my students. When I was in the classroom, I always received the highest score for knowing my kids, because I want them to have the best opportunity, be it, ELL, be it below level or gifted. So I have this way of, pinpointing and identifying kids and getting to know them. So I've always ranked very high in that area.
Yeah, and that was really interesting to me. And I feel like sometimes those gifted students are also bored, right? So there
100%.
might be moving around the classroom a lot, or might be almost what people would call a distraction, right? Because there's not challenged enough to be paying attention, right?
Right.
And so then it's up to you to notice that and say, how can we give them different work that challenges them?
Right. And not only is it, so we have to, first of all, pay attention to the kids, really get to know them. And once, in my district and most districts, they go through a screener. And then once they pass the screener, they go through different tests. But then most of the time, those kids get pulled out for certain subject, be it reading, math, or science. And then the gifted and talented teacher will provide instruction for that student, so he or she is not bored, and the teacher can continue, with regular instruction. And then all the needs are met for students. And that's how I am. Like, I want their needs to be met.
I love that. And I know that, going back to the training piece, you had talked about how the district has sort of a minimum training hours. And in general, you always exceeded that, and exceeded it by an exorbitant amount, like almost doubled that amount.
Yes.
And to me, that's somebody who is just an active learner, somebody who likes to have all of the skills to be able to help people.
So every district does their training differently. So in my district in Tampa, Florida, we were required to have, I believe it was 120 or 150 training hours to maintain your license. And after so your license is good for 5 years. So within the 5 years, you have to have a certain amount of training hours. And I exceeded that amount by 700. And then someone helped me do the math. And that growth was like 466%, because I want to have the training for the gifted kids. And most of those trainings, a lot of them came from, the ESOL kids and just the reading and just having that specialized certificate to help kids that I know need the most. So yes, I always want to learn. Like I'm the nerd, right?
And I also know that you have sort of positioned yourself on LinkedIn in a very unique way. So not only are you trying to help other people who are in their job search journey, you always put out messages. You're like, I'm just the messenger. I'm just the vehicle, right? And you're promoting other people in their job search, which is fantastic. But you've also taken some interesting approaches yourself to trying to get yourself noticed. And you and I had this conversation more on LinkedIn is that's how you get noticed, right? You got to use all the hashtags and tag all the people. And so not only have you called out businesses and said, hey, I'm looking for a job. Are you interested? You've also put out a challenge of like, I can do this job. And so tell us a little bit about that challenge and sort of the response that you got.
So one day I put a post, these are the jobs, these are the roles I'm looking for. And I listed them. It was like 1, 2, 3, whatever the post was, whatever the role was. And then the third one or fourth one, I wrote something like, give me a job and I bet you I can do it. And a CEO actually contacted me about a particular role. We never really finalized anything in particular, but I put myself out there. Oh, I have no problem. Like, I feel like, I'm the person that if you don't ask, you won't receive. If you do not make yourself known, no one will know about you. Right? There's a lot of people that, they feel maybe insecure or they feel embarrassed coming online, posting stuff like that. I'm not embarrassed because if I don't put myself out there, no one's going to know. I would have never met you. I would have never met, the different CEOs and recruiters that I've met. And those just open doors for opportunities. So am I going to be vulnerable? Absolutely. I want people to know, what I can do. It's not just for myself. It's to, so a hiring manager can find the best fit for roles that they want to fill as well.
Yeah. And, we've even talked about taking that one step further and using your curriculum knowledge to actually teach sort of your LinkedIn population something, right? And show how you can build a curriculum, teach somebody virtually over the course of so many weeks. And, but even your posts alone have been great. But I think you're at the point where I think you're going to be taking it one step further because I think you just want to maximize this journey as much as you can.
Absolutely. I found several people on LinkedIn that didn't know much about LinkedIn. And I actually had some different sessions for them where I built like a little mini LinkedIn course, we'll say, and I just walked them through the different steps on, the about me, you should have this, you should have that. I feel like like one of the things that teachers do, we are expected to know programs and curriculums. So it's getting to know programs and curriculums and knowing those things, educating yourself, because, it just opens opportunities to anyone.
And I think, what's also impressive about you is your desire to want to know more about processes, right? And you talked about it on the call. You've also talked about it with me a little bit more about some projects and some opportunities that you've tried just to learn about the process, to speak up, to see how it is for people. And you mentioned that when you were talking about the SNAP benefits and saying, I wanted to just go and see what the process was like, right? And for me, that's somebody who you want to help people if and when the time comes. So you're exploring each of these processes to say, how can this be improved? And how can I help somebody who's in a situation that may not be able to navigate it as well as I can? Right. And so I love that that's something that you're so interested in. I mean, I know you were looking at a job opportunity and you tried out a new job and you were like, here were the positives, here were the negatives, right? And you were looking at it as, if I were to help somebody in this process, here's what I'd tell them.
Right. Someone said to me one time, the person said, you ask a lot of questions. And I thought to myself, I do ask a lot of questions, because if you don't ask, like, how are you going to learn? How are you going to improve? How are you going to better yourself? And not just that, it's not just for myself, let's say you're working on a project and you already know me. Clearly I could help you, and during this process, one of the things I've learned so much about myself is I am a great problem solver. And I think that comes with asking questions. I've had conversations with people in person. I've just walked up to people where I live and I'll just tell them, oh, what do you do? How you doing? Tell me about your job. So Madison, my daughter, had an opportunity to have another dog walking client. And it was a couple. And the wife was telling me about her husband, that he works from home. I went right in. So what does he do? What company does he work for? Right. And so I could go and check and just see what are the roles and opportunities in that company. And then she said, and then she started to tell me about her job. So this is like the networking part of who I am. And so she said, oh, I work for this company. I said, that's so bizarre. My ex-husband works for that company. She said, okay, I want you to go home and I want you to look at all the different jobs, find one, apply for it, let me know. And I did that. So it's the networking, it's problem solving, it's talking to people, asking questions, getting to know companies. I've actually come to really love, this whole process, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And the coffee chats are something we talked about in addition, because, the benefit of that is you may talk to somebody and that person may not have a role open in their company, but they know other people in other companies that do have roles open, and they're going to speak highly of you when they recommend you to that company or that employer. And so having those networking calls, there's no downside to them. Absolutely zero. You're taking the time to learn about somebody, you're connecting with them on LinkedIn, and now you're growing your network at a minimum.
Absolutely. I mean, I've met some amazing, amazing people. I've met a few recruiters that they said, if we had a role right now, I would literally hire you right now. And both of those two recruiters actually told me, and I thought this was a huge compliment. They said, wow, right now, I can't afford you right now. And so I think what they saw was my skill set, my experience, and they were like, I can't afford you right now. Money's tight for a lot of people. So yes, definitely.
That's awesome. So what have been, two positive things that you've seen during your job search?
So two positives, definitely through the chat, through the coffee chats, really getting to know my strengths, because, when you're in a classroom, it's kind of like, you're kind of like in a box. Like I felt like I was in a box, right? Doing the teacher thing all the time. And so once I left the classroom, I had to, I guess, relearn, about who I really am, as a transitioning teacher, learning my skill set. So definitely, finding out what my strengths are. And another positive is just really getting to know people, just really networking and connecting and talking to people. And through this process, I've learned that one of my core values is to be of service. So, owning, my core values, getting to know who I am as a professional, my skill set, and, networking it's been a really good experience.
Yeah. That's really great. And I hope that when you find a job, not if, but when you find your next adventure, that you don't stop being on LinkedIn and building that community and being of service to those job seekers that you are trying to help. So I hope we keep you here and helping
Yes,
out.
no, I'm in it for the long haul. I'm in it for the long. Unfortunately, I've taken a slight pause. I'm in the process of moving. So, so that's, but I love LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is fabulous.
That's good. And I know we talked a little bit about your overall experience, but can you also provide maybe two more specific challenges that you've had in that job search?
So one challenge, I have two. So the first challenge, I guess, is the ghosting. So I had a CEO literally reach out to me, and he said he read my post and he saw that, the little blurb was create a role and watch me do it or something like that. And he said after he read that, he reached out to me and we actually had a conversation. He was the CEO of a company, of a school, an online school, and we had a coffee chat and we talked about it, and it was an immediate connection. He felt he wanted me to help him to help his students to find, their next career. And then I thanked him, after the conversation. Thank you for, the coffee chat. I look forward to speaking with you again. And then I didn't hear from him. So the ghosting is huge. I have a problem with that. I do. The second challenge is after applying for a particular role, sometimes a hiring manager will reply and say, we're no longer hiring for that role, but it was available. So if the role is not available, if you're no longer hiring for that role, not a problem, just remove it. So there is no, false hope. There's no expectation. Everyone's story is different. So when I'm applying for a role, it's because not do I just want to help and be of service and, help the company, but it's a financial, importance to me. So when something like that happens, I feel let down. So ghosting, it has to end. And one way to end the ghosting is once you have maybe 50 applicants, you can take it down. There's no reason to have 200 people applying for one role. So that will help with the ghosting. I think recruiters will have less work to do hiring. It'll just make the process easier. So definitely the ghosting and just being, keeping the post up a certain time and take it down once you've had your applicants. I think that would make the process a lot easier for everyone.
Look at you already problem solving.
It's what I do. Literally, it's what I do.
Your brain's just always in that mode. And I'll share with you too, as a recruiter, right? I have put jobs on pause, in terms of so the job seeker can't see them, but they're not fully closed, so that if I have to re-engage that role again, it's already there and I just press play, basically. Right. But to your point, right? I mean, if I get 50 applicants, immediately put it on pause, because Absolutely. If one of those 50 isn't working, we're going to know that as soon as we start going through.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right? And I think to the point of the ghosting or the lack of response at all, right? And I'm going to make some people mad here, but recruiting has an AI function, right? They have sort of resume screeners that are built into software platforms. I personally am not a fan. And I'm not a fan for the reason you're mentioning. Because oftentimes, and I know that with resume screeners, right, you can get more resumes looked at, more resumes can be seen. However, and this was in our conversation initially too, was we're not educated in high school or in middle school how to build an effective resume.
Absolutely.
So if I don't say that on your job posting, right, it says words like customer service or even in your case, like student success and student experience and, all these other phrases, if I'm not using that because I've been a teacher and I'm just speaking to, I taught math and I taught English and and you're not speaking to those other key words that are in the posting, that auto screener is going to disqualify you.
Absolutely.
So you're in a disqualified bucket, even though you very well could be a qualified candidate and the screener isn't picking up on those different words that you're using, right? And nobody goes back and checks and says, did the screener actually screen the right response?
Right.
And so those people either get an auto rejection or they sit in the talent pool until they close the job, and going to your point, I'm a big fan of send people rejections, right? And send them to them timely. I mean, when I started my business, I'd been applying to jobs. 6 months later, after I'd already started my business, I got a rejection. And I was like, I assumed I didn't get it. It's been 6 months, right? But that makes me more frustrated.
Absolutely.
Because I'm like, you would have waited 6 months. First of all, if I was still being considered, I'm not interested because that's way too long. Right. But to your point, if I put this job on pause at 50 applicants, if I don't like that applicant, rejection right away.
Absolutely.
Don't wait until you figure out which candidates are the right candidates. If you know that person is not qualified, send them an immediate rejection email.
Right. I agree.
They would rather get one 24 hours after they applied than wait 6 months.
Absolutely. And, when again, the problem solver that I am, so I'm looking at roles and I keep seeing 200 applicants and I was just like, this is not right. And so I thought to myself, okay, if I was the recruiter or hiring manager, how many, what would be a safe number for me to stop at? To me, I think 50 is a safe number. When you have your 50, these are the candidates, you have your piles, whatever the case may be. These are my 10 I'm going to go to. These are the ones that are the maybes, just make it easy. I think it's easier for everyone. I mean, I remember applying for a role and it was a fantastic role. And I did the thing, I reached out to someone in the company and the person, we went to the same college. And so I introduced myself. Oh, we both went to, Hunter College in New York. I just want to connect with you. And then I did the thing and I wanted to get some information about the company. And he immediately asked me, so what role are you applying for? And so I just took that opportunity. I went in and I told him the role and he said, let me ask my program manager about that. Let me ask. And he came back and I felt really genuinely, really bad for him. He said that role, we're not actually my manager, we're not actually hiring for that role. It was a dummy role. So he got caught in the crossfire. He had to be the one. And I felt so bad. because he had to be the one to deliver that message. I said, and I replied, I said, so what you're telling me is they're really not hiring for that role? And he didn't reply because he got stuck in the middle of a dummy role, which is, and that's a problem because now, there shows there's a lack of trust between the applicant and the company. And, people just start to feel, insecure about the process. So keep the applications at a minimum. Make sure the time frame is sufficient, 2 weeks, whatever the case may be. So it's just easier on everyone. And we can, so the process can be a little more seamless, for everyone, and roles aren't just, open for long periods of time, I guess.
And I think that also can send a bad message to your employees, not only because they're caught sort of in the backlash of that, right? But also because if now they know that the company posts dummy roles, they're like, are we really growing?
I know.
Are we pretending we're growing? Like, then they start to question their own sort of company and their role within the organization.
I know.
So I think that there's a lot of challenge with that. So, definitely, I think that your journey is not, I'll say, unique in the sense of a lot of people are experiencing this similar challenges that you're facing. I think you as a human being are unique, but I don't think your experience is unique, in terms of those ghosting, not getting responses back, having dummy roles, all of those things I think are common challenges.
Absolutely.
And they're all things that I am passionate about removing from the process.
Yes, you are. I mean, you have maintained integrity, since I've known you, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. And some insight onto those 200, applicant roles, right? So I can tell you, I've posted roles on LinkedIn, and I believe in, diverse, equitable hiring, all of that, right? But there are times when individuals apply from other countries, and that's all well and good, right? But there are some companies that don't allow for sponsorship, that don't have extra room in the lottery because they've already used their lottery numbers. So they can't even consider those applicants. And so sometimes, and this is what I tell people, 100 of those applicants might not even be in the US.
Absolutely. Right.
So it's diluting the numbers a little bit and saying, oh, well, there are all these candidates that applied. And it's like, some of them may not even be eligible because of where they live.
That's, I never thought about that, actually.
The other portion may also be very underqualified and just be sort of applying to see what sticks, right? And so by the time you actually cipher through, or filter through all of those 200 applicants, you probably only end up with 50 that are like, maybe yes, and then like, I can see where they're coming from, but no, right? Like you get sort of down into that funnel, and you get like 10 to 20 who may be in the yes and maybe pile.
And,
Right.
I came up with a solution. I presented this to a hiring manager, and she actually thought it was a great idea. So let's say, for example, there's 50. They print the resumes out, and these are the 10 that are a definite, that they would definitely hire. So I thought to myself, and I presented this to someone. So with those 10 applicants, what I felt that they should do is and someone's going to appreciate this, because the problems that I solve, I know I help other people, and that's fine. So with these 10 applicants, what I suggested to the hiring manager was, why don't you have, 10, to a week or so of coffee chats with these individuals. You wear your hair down, you have your coffee, and you're just literally getting to know the applicant. One of my neighbors, she works for a company that's based out of Australia. And she said their hiring process does not have the typical questions like, tell me about yourself. What are your strengths? There are no cookie cutter, questions. They're not the same question all the time. They spend time getting to know the applicant, just talking to them. It has nothing to do, because they value the resume. So if maybe hiring managers and recruiters would take a week or so to have coffee chats and just to get to know the actual applicants, apart from the actual job, get to know them. Because I've had someone say, people that work for companies say, we hire people, not roles. Mm-hmm. Get to know the person, get to know their value, get to know their core values, what they stand for, their principles. And I think that would eliminate a lot of the, excessive amount of work, that is dedicated to the hiring process. I threw that out there, and they thought it was a great idea.
Yeah, I love that idea. And, I'm the other challenge I have are sort of, and I've had some other people on LinkedIn refer to them as gotcha tactics, right? Even the questions that you were mentioning, I've heard a lot of weird questions in interview processes, right? The tell me about yourself one is so vague that they're asking people to go on a tangent, right? Because
Right.
you're not, especially since we've had no coaching as a society on how to do an interview,
Correct.
you're like, tell me about myself. Well, I can go personal, I can go professional, I can like, and there's so many avenues that it's like you're basically asking for me to go on a tangent of something you don't want me to say, but I don't know what that is, right? And so
Right.
rather than tell me about yourself, it's tell me about how you feel your experiences would be a great fit for this role.
Exactly.
You're
Exactly.
narrowing in on the thing that you want them to share with you. It's also been the case for me of like, the whole why did you leave your last employer? I hate to break it to you folks. Nobody's telling you the truth,
It's
right?
true.
And that's because we've created a society where we don't want the truth, right? So I've left roles because I had a micromanaging manager and the culture was toxic. But I can't say that in an interview because that makes me look bad, right? So my response has to be there wasn't enough growth. The culture didn't align with my values, right? Not those things are not untrue, right? They're not
Right.
untrue, but they're not the straw that broke the camel's back, so to
Right.
speak.
Right. I,
Um, and so
mhm.
for me, like that's the kind of stuff that it's like, don't ask people why they've left their last role. Ask them what
What
makes
they
them
have to
want to work
offer.
here, right?
Exactly.
Or say, what was a challenge that you faced in your last role that you're hoping to, change in a new role that you're in, right? Find a different way to ask that because honestly, it's bringing you no value by knowing why they left their last employer.
Right. Right. So I applied for a role and I did part of the application process was, did you ever separate your agreement with an employer, something along those lines? And I did, a few years ago, this is going, not even a few, it's several years ago. My employer and myself, we separated our agreement. And so I checked yes. And then in reply to that, they wanted to know the specifics, which put me out there. Right. And so at the end of the day, both my vision and the organization's vision, like we just weren't meshing. So I had to really craft a really specific, email in my defense and not to even bash the employer. It's
Mm.
really it was hard, but I think I did a really good job because they were impressed and they wanted to move forward. They ended up changing the direction of that particular role, but they would have hired me. So I guess I did a good job doing that. But yeah, like I feel like get to know the applicant, hear what he or she has to how he or she can add value. If and find out, okay, so if you're looking for someone to solve problems, tell me about the last two problems you just solved.
Mhm.
I think that's a great question.
Yeah, and more than just, even go one step further and say, okay, tell me the type of problem that you solved and then how you solved it, right? Because I want to also know like how did you do it, right? And what was the impact of that problem solved,
Exactly.
right? So
Exactly.
digging into that deeper, especially if that's something that's going to be a main component of the role. And so I do think you're onto something. I believe in getting to know people, because you can train just about anything. You can send them to learn just about anything. But if they are not and I hate to say culture fit, right? But if they are not bought into what you do in the organization and they don't have strengths that round out your team's weaknesses, then it doesn't really matter, does it? Right.
Right.
So I see it all the time with expectation setting with hiring managers. They're like, we want all of our candidates to have all of this experience. And I was like, basically, you're saying, I want my squirrel to be purple and I want it to fly.
Right.
But you will take a gray squirrel or a brown squirrel or a white squirrel or a flying squirrel, but you're not going to get the purple flying one because it's not possible. Even the person in the role that you had didn't have all of those criteria. So
Right.
for me, I always go in and say, what are the things that are non-negotiable that they have to have entering the
Right.
door? And what are the things that you're willing to train? Because I'm not going to look for the things that you need to train. I'm going to look for the non-negotiables.
Exactly. Exactly. One of the things that I found interesting also, it's new to me. because this is all new to me pretty much, is the 30-minute phone screener. And so it's meant to just, pick the applicant's brain really quick. I've had several of those, and most of the time when they tell me, okay, what questions do you have for me? Most of the time they can't answer the questions because that person is a third party, they're hired as a third party, contractor or whatever the case may be. And most of the time they don't have the answers to those questions. And so that is one part that, to me, like when I prepare for those phone calls, those screeners, I prepare as though it's an interview. So I have my questions ready, I have my stories, behind everything that I've done. And when they can't answer the question, it's kind of like, you did all this work, like job seekers just want to work, just to find their fit, and so some of those little things could be eliminated, to be honest with you.
So I'll tell you, as somebody who has done phone screens, right? And I sort of say this all the time, and this is not a knock at recruiters. I value recruiters. I think that they're fantastic and what they do is so challenging. But in all honesty, recruiters do not fully understand, in most cases, the job that they are hiring for. Because if they're working in a corporation, they're hiring for 100 jobs in their corp, right, in their org, and they can't understand every single one to the fullest capacity. So what happens is the hiring manager says, here are the things that are most important to me. And maybe there's 3, maybe there's 4. They're right. They go on the job description. This is why I tell everybody bold those keywords, because the recruiter gets 8 to 12 seconds and they're going in and saying, all right, I have my checklist. These are the things the hiring manager is looking for. Check, check, check. And if you don't have them, they move on. Right.
Absolutely.
And they'll come back to it maybe if there's time, but they're going to move on. And so to your point, right, that phone screen is basically for them to just say, are the things that I saw on the resume, the things that really the hiring manager is looking for. But to your point, they don't know anything else outside of that role. So you're not only building your resume to get through the screening process, you're then also adding elements that the hiring manager also wants to know that are extras, right? But that the recruiter may not fully grasp the context in which those need to be used in that role.
Right. I agree. That makes sense.
So, and as a recruiter, I can say it was true for me. I mean, there were many times where I was hiring a role that I'm like, don't ask me how to do it. I have no clue. I just know that these are the things they need. Right. And so when I would take phone screen notes during that process, I literally was like a transcriptionist, right? I was literally just typing everything that person said, because to me, I have no context, right? They could have said something that was like, oh, I did this incredible project. And I'm like, great. But that means nothing to me. So I sent it to the hiring manager. The hiring manager's like, the fact that they did that project is fantastic. I'm like, great, hire them, right? Like, but for me, I'm just getting all the information captured because I maybe don't know the role as effectively as the hiring manager or as the employees doing it. So I'm just there to sort of be the middle person translating that information.
Right.
So yes, I agree with you. Do you have any advice that you would give to job seekers who are going through the process right now?
Absolutely. One of the things that I think job seekers should do is they should find some sort of career assessment, like personality assessment, get to know yourself and, just maybe find out the roles that, pair with your passions, your strengths, your weaknesses. And the second thing is get a list of your target companies and start paying attention to them on LinkedIn. Right. And even introduce yourself, do something different and sort of, maybe an introduction letter, a video, just get to know the companies of your choice and make sure your companies match your core values. So I guess to that, have a list of your core values and look for those companies.
And I think too, and people are going to get this from what we said, is don't be disenchanted by the process. Looking for a job is a full-time job. I mean, it's just the truth of the matter. It's a full-time job to go on, find jobs, apply to jobs, track that you've applied, follow up, right? All of that is a full-time job. And so when there are struggles or hurdles or challenges, don't let those disenchant you from the goal. And that is finding a job that you are going to excel at.
Right. And another tip to what you just said is if you could find like some sort of accountability partner, someone that you check in with, maybe at the beginning of the week or the middle of the week or something like that, just to keep you, grounded, because it could be very, very overwhelming and could be discouraging. So maybe have an accountability partner, someone you check in with, these are the highs and lows of my week, and let that person speak into your life and, share what, they see in you, because it could be a very, very lonely process. It can.
And what I will say is, if you feel alone in this process, not only am I here to help you, but reach out to Karen. She'll do a coffee chat with you.
Absolutely. I haven't had a coffee chat in a while. I've been missing them, but no, really, so anyone listening to this, if you're a job seeker, anyone, my name is Karen Rojas. You could find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to send me a DM. So I recently titled myself as a seasoned job seeker, and I'm not ashamed of it, right? Like, this is a process for myself, and I'm absolutely fine with the process. But, there are people, I met a lady on LinkedIn, and she was having a real hard time one day. She was putting some messages out, and I really felt like she was in a moment of crisis. I honestly felt like she was in a moment of crisis, and I sent her a DM and I said, do you need to talk? And, I felt like she really needed someone. And to be honest with you, I really felt as though I saved her life that day, honestly. So reach out. If you feel alone, honestly, send me a DM. I read every message, and I will respond to every message as well.
And employers, hire Karen. I don't know how else to say it plainly. Hire Karen, right? And you have so many things that you're good at. You would even be willing to do, short-term projects, right? Because we talked about that project-based, so hire Karen. She's out there ready to work for you.
Well, let me just add something. So I do have a little side gig. And so if you're in sales, or if you're an SDR, if you're in that area, you need to listen to this. So to pay the bills, I took on a little side role where I help small to mid-sized businesses to recover unclaimed funds through the CARES Act. Some people think that went away. So it has not gone away. There's still lots of money in the CARES Act if you have a company that was impacted by COVID. So I closed 4 deals, 4 companies. I sourced all the leads myself. And the total payout for the total revenue for these 4 companies is $504,000. That's how much money I helped 4 companies get. So if you're in sales, you're looking for someone in sales, I'm a good talker. I can talk to people. I know how to source leads. I know how to ask qualifying questions. So that's something that I've also, that's kind of in my wheelhouse too. Again, I'm a multi-potentialite. So you just throw something at me, I'm sure I can do it.
And if not, you're going to learn how to do it on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on some sort of platform. So I will make sure that we include your LinkedIn, where people can find you on LinkedIn, what your handle is. Are there any other ways, are you on any other social media platforms that you're on, or is it mainly LinkedIn?
Actually, since I've been on LinkedIn, I'm really not on Facebook anymore or Instagram. I spend most of my time on LinkedIn.
Awesome. So I like to end every episode by talking about my favorite poet of all time, Maya Angelou. May she rest in peace forever, rest in power. She has a great quote that says, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And I'm sure as a teacher, this rings very true for you. Can you share a time when that was true for you?
Yes. So I have to, give honor and credit to my daughter. She's 14, and she'll always leave me these little notes like, "You'll find a job, you'll do this, you're really great. And, you're working so hard." And the reason why, even though she's not on LinkedIn and that's not her thing, she's the one that knows me the best, and she sees my effort. And so she'll always say, "You're going to get a job, you're going to do great." So I guess, and to her credit, or to my credit, to our credit, she's an entrepreneur. She's doing a great job. She's a dog walker. She's making, great money. So, I guess, to my daughter, I guess.
And that's awesome, because like you were saying, I mean, even those messages she writes on the little notes, you may not remember every word that she puts on there, but you remember the feeling that she gives you of like, she's there to be your cheerleader. She's there to encourage you. And you've been that for her, right? So it's interesting that she's now giving that back to you.
Exactly.
It's full circle, but I love that. And a lot of people don't say their children, but I think, that happens a lot is, your children are silently or even vocally cheering you on. And in the mix of it all, you don't notice.
Absolutely. Yes.
But you're noticing, which is great.
Yes. Mhm.
So before we end the episode, is there anything you'd like to share with any listeners out there that we haven't covered?
I would just encourage, I guess job seekers to, stay connected on LinkedIn. If you feel like you need a break, take that break. If you feel like, it's middle of the week and you feel a little burnt out, take the break, take the time off that you need. This process can be overwhelming. So, and if you feel like you need someone, reach out. Do not do life alone. There's a lot of people that are, alone and lonely, and I reach out to me, but don't do this alone. If you feel overwhelmed, take a pause, take a break, reach out to someone, and, but stay connected on LinkedIn. It's a powerful, powerful tool. It's wonderful. It's amazing. I've met, a lot of great people. So stay connected.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate you being here. And to all the listeners out there, as I end every episode, lead with empathy, act with kindness. Have a great day, y'all. Thank you for listening to All People Podcast. If you enjoyed our show, I'd love for you to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. The work doesn't end here. If you want to keep the conversation going, find me on LinkedIn or Facebook, or visit my website, apeoplepartnerllc.com. Lead with empathy and act with kindness. Have a great day.